I came to Loretto in 1987. After years of teaching philosophy, I came to do bookkeeping. But at the Mother House, it's a custom that everybody tries to sign up for some committee. So I signed up for the tour committee, not knowing a whole lot about it. And there were 4 people who had been on the committee for a long time, and then some of us who were just getting into the spirit of it. The person who gave the tours at that time was Sister Leo Ann Schuler. Uh-huh. And after a while, she decided, after a few years, that she didn't want to do that part of it anymore. So I've been doing them probably since the early 2000s, or even the 1990s, I think, probably. Mm-hmm. And so much of what I know about the history here, I learned from Sister Leo Ann, mm-hmm. and then also from books and articles that I've read over the years, and some things from the tourists. For instance, the way I learned about the fact that the bricks in the buildings built after about 17 or 1800, that those buildings are bricked in what's called common bond. Some woman told me that, and then I forgot the whole thing. And then an architect came along, told me the same thing, and a week later sent me a whole page of just different ways that you can lay bricks. So we learn from those who come, as well as we're giving history as we're going along. So I've been leading tours ever since then. One thing is that we were part of what was called the Holy Land Tours. Gethsemane, the Mother House, the Dominicans, the Sisters of Charity in Bardstown. And so large tour buses would come, and the people had simply signed up for the Holy Land Tour, sometimes 40, 45 people. Mm-hmm. That has eased off a little bit, but we still get parishes that bring a lot of their parishioners down on a tour. We get, of course, all of the Loretto groups that come, the new members, prospective new members, the students from the high schools. One woman brings her confirmation class every year. So their interest is always in the church. For many people, the interest is the cemetery, either because they've known sisters in the past who are buried here, or they're just interested in old cemeteries. Since the Archives Museum now has a tape of the whole plantation, as it were, most of the touring that we do is outside tours, except for the church. But you can't classify who's coming. Louisville and Lexington send a lot of groups from parishes. And we keep busy, sometimes 2 or 3 tours a week, and then sometimes we'll go a month with nobody. Peg and I made that film, that video. Oh. Just, I guess we thought it up. And then they now have put it over there. It's about 16 minutes. And I think it's on one of the Loretto sites also. We found out it had been put on YouTube, but I don't know if it's still there. I'll tell you the story as it goes. About everything here, we usually have 2 stories, and you get your choice. But I'll only give you one story here. It was in about 1785 that a man from Maryland got a lot of land out in this area at some kind of grant. And so there were people in Maryland who wanted to come away from Maryland because they were not being able to vote and they couldn't run for office, and economically they were in trouble. So 60 families came out here. Now, one of those families was the family of Bennett Rhodes. And so Bennett Rhodes had a farm in this area, and his sister, Mary Rhodes, came out to teach his children. And so that is how we started in 1812. Eventually, Father Nerings moved down there. And the thing that happened there was that Father Nerings wanted also to start a school for boys. And the sisters had helped him get the land and start to build a building. And then in 1823, Nerings went to Europe to beg money and from his friends, or also things for the churches. Well, while he was gone, another priest moved into that building and started a school for boys. So when Father Nerings got back, of course, he had no place to be there. Well, Father Nerings then left in 1824, and the bishop, in order to settle the whole issue, gave us this land where we are now in exchange for the land. Bennett Road's land was on Rolling Fork, which is about 11 miles from here. I think we probably got a good part of the deal in moving up here, but at that time it was a real change. This land that we are on had belonged to Father Stephen Baden, who was the first priest ordained in the United States, and this is where he was sent by Bishop Carroll. So then by that, he had left in 1819, so the place was pretty empty, and so then that's why the bishop was able to move us up here. Our early name was the Little Society of the Friends of Mary at the Foot of the Cross. Father Nerings had a particular devotion to the shrine of Loretto in Italy. And that shrine, or now a basilica, covers over what is said to be the house in which Jesus, Mary, and Joseph lived originally. That house was transported to this place in Italy, and that place then was named Loretto by them, I guess. And Father Nerings liked that. So when the sisters went to Rome to finally see about the constitutions, it turned out that the name, the Little Society, the Friends of Mary at the Foot of the Cross, was too long. And so they changed it then at that point to the Sisters of Loretto. I mean, we're not Dominicans or Benedictines or Franciscans. So it was more like a place name that we have. Like you'd say to somebody, well, those are the sisters from Loretto. And then it became the Sisters of Loretto, but still at the foot of the cross, because that's the devotion. So that's what I can tell you about the name. That's right. I don't know them as having place names, but like they say, the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet. And so there are some like that, you know, the holy names of Spokane or something like that. If you look at old rule books, that's what's printed on the front page. It wasn't Nerings so much. I think it was when Mother Praxedes was there about the rule. Well, what I've read is that it was at that time that it was changed. Imagine the people in the neighborhood always just called them, well, those are the sisters down at Loretto. At the first founding of the Little Loretto here in Kentucky, there were two cabins and adjoining, and at one point they closed in that breezeway between the two cabins and made a chapel out of it. So that would have been like the chapel at Loretto. So the name is all connected with all of that, I think. It was Nerinx's devotion to Loretto that really got the whole name started with us at all. At the very beginning, Nerinx was in trouble with a lot of, he himself was in trouble with a lot of the clergy. And one of them, of course, was Father Chabraw. And Chabraw was good friends with the bishop because he was the first priest that the bishop had ordained. And so Chabraw complained about Nerinx to the bishop. And the bishop then sided with people who said that the rule was too severe, that the sisters couldn't live such a hard life. Among other things, they wore shoes only from November to March. And they were in real poverty. They had to do their own gardening. And there is a story that sometimes they would go to bed one night and they didn't know what they were going to feed either themselves or the boarders the next day. And then somebody would come by and bring some food for them, just like a miracle. But things were, they were very hard. But the sisters were not the ones complaining. It was the priests that were complaining that the rule was too hard. And so that was an early thing. Later on, of course, the question of the rule, in the beginning, you can't say we were diocesan. I guess we were more like parochial. And when the sisters started moving out to other places, the priest would get a little interfering spell and would also say things about the fact that the rule was too hard and they should forget this part of the rule. And so it was getting around the country as we spread too much diversity that the order was not going to be able to hold together because the parish priest or the bishop were making up the rules for this group and then somebody from another group. And so that was the push at that time to get out from under the bishops and to become pontifical. At this time, we may think that's not such a good move, but at that time, it seemed to them the best thing to do. That's right. They would make it less severe, usually, not more severe, but less severe. One bishop or priest, I guess, encouraged the sisters to either build or do something and to run a large debt. And of course, the congregation didn't know at first that she'd made that deal. And so then financially, that became a problem. We all know stories later on where priests would either refuse to accept a certain sister who had been assigned, or would they demand that a certain sister be left there because they liked her as a principal. I mean, that kind of interference is along the way, I think. Because they couldn't get the rule passed through the Bishop of Louisville, he wouldn't send any of the information on to Rome, any of the requests. And that's why Mother Praxedes got herself over there personally, because she was advised by another priest that was the only way that she'd succeed, if she would go herself. So, there were priests who were for them and priests who were against them. I'm sure that's true of every congregation that's ever existed. There were priests who did the translation of the rule into Latin, and the priest from Gethsemane was over here trying to get things onto the translator. But a lot of people were helping, but that led to all that trouble. And then the story, of course, is that once, while Mother Praxedes was in Rome, Mother Francisca was in charge here. And because there was no priest on the property, she moved the caretaker into the priest's house for insurance purposes, because if your building isn't lived in, there's a problem. So then when the bishop found out that there was a layman living in the priest's house, he got all upset. And that's when he handed down the interdict. And he closed down the church. I mean, any services in the church, no priest was allowed to come, even if a sister was dying, I mean, anything. And Mother Francisca, of course, was pretty upset about that, because it was, I mean, if a sister was dying, they couldn't have masses said for her. They couldn't do anything like that. And when Mother Praxedes got back, well, Mother Francisca moved the man out of the house. I don't know what happened about the insurance, but they moved him out. So that only lasted about 2 weeks until that was cleared up. But when Mother Praxedes got back, she moved him back in the house. So she was not to be undone. Well, maybe there's a lesson of perseverance through hard times, of sticking to what you believe in. We really are the hub of Catholicity in this country, actually, in this state for sure, because this is where Baden really started what really was mission work. There had been priests here before, one of whom fell from his horse and was killed, thrown from his horse, one of whom was killed when a beam of a house he was trying to build fell on him. So that early, and one of them became an alcoholic, and so that wasn't much for building stuff. But Baden came in about 1793, and then Nerings in 1805. So they were really the ones who set up a parish system in this country. We were trying to get together another video on churches, because Nerings was responsible for building either, well, one letter says 11, one says 13 churches. And he did a lot of that with his own manual labor. And then otherwise he was working along with the people that were building the church. So I think people need to know that this is a hub, and that this is a Baptist state, but we are the center of the Catholic Church in the area. And from that early mission went out many of the churches that are around us, even 100 miles away or more, still were started from here. So stability, I think, is one thing, and faithfulness, that the group has stayed with it, in good times and bad. And we fit in well, I think, with the people in the area, because we were started by people in the area, not by Europeans. Mm-hmm. Well, I think in the values, certainly the early sisters led a very simple life. That theirs may be by circumstance, but I think what we try to do is that sort of thing, of faithfulness, of devotion. And I think that the values that the schools are now teaching the students, faith, community, justice, respect, I think that's part of what we try to show in the neighborhood. Neighborliness, involvement in projects, doing what needs to be done. In the early days, of course, the sisters did a lot more with families, and they took in orphans, they took in widows, they did all of those things to try to, help whatever the people needed. And during the years, although they weren't nurses, many sisters nursed during the wars. And just that kind of involvement, I think, is a value that shows and that, people don't know that we're the Loretto Motherhouse. They still call us up at the academy from way long ago when that's what we were, an academy. But they know there's something up here that's been here a very long time, although they may have never come up here by themselves. If you think of our involvement with community, you can think of the whole thing over the Bluegrass Pipeline. Not that we led anything, but that we were involved in it, and that it brought about community spirit, which I think is part of community building, part of that effort, trying to get more people involved in projects. I mean, we've done all sorts of protests and all. The local people aren't much into protests, but they know that there's that picture, and the people in the state know that we're down here. We write so many letters, they can't miss the fact that we're here. We're always protesting about something or congratulating the legislator who does go, and take a position that's helpful to people. So I think that I would hope would continue. Of course, with co-members and volunteers and students from our schools and the friends circle, a lot of that is with the hope that those people will have a spirit of Loretto, and that they will carry it out places where Loretto is not going to be able to go. Because I think it's quite obvious that it's certain that the number of vowed religious is going down in every congregation, men, women, except the Jesuits. I saw the other day they have something like, 16,000. They're not going to worry about going down. But that's what the hope would be, with those other people would have imbibed those principles and would spread them out into the world where we're not able to go. Oh, well, small is probably the picture. A thing that I didn't mention before is a whole push for environmental protection that we have done a lot. I mean, we're working on our farm to make it more sustainable and enriching the fields, and trying to, with a couple of good farm managers who have good ideas on things that will make things better, that could give ideas to other people in the area about what they need to do also for their property or whatever it is. And our attempt to keep commercial businesses out of our particular area, and that you have a right to fight for that. So in the future, I think it just has to be, well, a lot of it, I hope, will be memory of what we have done. And who knows? Anything about the future is speculative. And we spend a lot of time praying and discerning to see what should come next, where we should go. So we'll have to see. That's where you'd have to talk to Sister Kathleen von der Haar, who also gives the tours and is very much involved in that sort of thing. There have been all sorts of suggestions about building another building that would have like all on the ground floor and so many semi-apartments around a central space. I mean, any configuration you can think of has probably been suggested. Well, no, I think if you would, if the group is really going to go through the book, the change book, the latest book, that chapter by chapter, you'll see different suggestions that will go into detail on a lot of the areas in which people would be interested, I think. So other than that, I just hope that we stick to being the spirit of faith and community in this area, and keep spreading the good word and the values that make life more livable. I thank you for asking me.